What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Not About Wrestling. I'm your host, Chris Illuminati, and today on the show, I'm talking to Tom Green. No, not that Tom Green. This Tom Green is a former wrestling promoter. Green started booking shows at the insanely young age of 18 and got into the business in an incredibly odd way. Green's friend somehow stumbled upon the home phone number of former New Japan and WCW star Scott Norton. So the two called Norton and asked if he wanted to be on a wrestling show that didn't even exist yet. Norton said yes. Suddenly, the duo were wrestling promoters. Green and his partner spent every dime on promoting the shows for the newly formed Fight Sports Midwest, grabbing every top name on the indie wrestling scene to wrestle in front of passionate fans in his home state of Indiana. Fight Sports Midwest lasted only a few cards, but the incredible talent on the shows dominate professional wrestling today. Names like Tyler Black, who went on to become Seth Rollins, Eddie Kingston, Samoa Joe, Claudio Castagnoli, who people know as Cesaro, and Austin Aries, just to name a few. These days, Green only books wrestling shows for charity purposes, but still finds a way to make wrestling a part of his daily life. He's the creator of the amazing Twitter feed WCW Deep Cuts, where he highlights some of the more absurd TV moments in the history of World Championship Wrestling. In this episode, Green discusses his early love of wrestling and tape trading, the amount of work that went into booking those Fight Sports Midwest cards, the mistakes he made and the lessons he learned along the way, and how getting into the wrestling business is pretty damn easy, but surviving in the business is a whole other story. Ladies and gentlemen, entering the podcast, hailing from Lafayette, Indiana, this is Tom Green. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Not About Wrestling. I'm Chris Illuminati, and with me today is, God, you have so many different job titles. I mean, what do you want to start with?
We could start with anything because I've done a lot. I've never really thought of it, but I have done a lot.
Well, we should start with Tom Green. That's your name.
Yes, we should. Hi.
Yes.
Not that Tom Green.
Yeah. When did that become a pain?
Sixth grade. So the Monday before middle school was the premiere of the Tom Green Show on MTV. So that was So imagine going into middle school. It's bad enough, that's when everything gets worse for most kids. And then I have to go to school that day, being named after not being named after, but having the same name as the guy from the weird show that everybody watched on MTV 2 nights ago, where he was drinking out of cow udders and spray painting prostitutes on his mom's car or what have you. So that was a blast. Just years and years of, are you related to him? And I have had so many people sing the Bum Bum song to me. I've had to learn to embrace it. That's where the Twitter handle came from, because that's how I've introduced myself to most strangers for the past 20-something years. Not that Tom Green. So you could just fit it in there.
The one thing I love about that, like, they probably all thought they were the first to make the reference, or
absolutely, like, to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Like when my wife and I started dating, I had so many in-laws that were like, like the guy from MTV, huh? And then you could tell they were like, sure, I had never heard it before. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna.
Did it ever come in handy?
I mean, he followed me on Twitter for like a month, and I think he retweeted me once, and I got some followers off of that. But other than that, not particularly. I mean, if you want to aggregate like a news story off of this, I can give you a headline that, like, I accept Glenn Huplick for everything he's done.
Okay.
If you want to do that, that's totally cool. Don't mention that I'm not him, but yeah.
That works. I guess in the name lottery, it could have been worse.
Yes, I was going to say I could bond with you over names that probably bring up questions. Let's
Yeah,
say.
like everyone thinks mine's a writing name.
Yeah.
Which obviously it's not. I once had a woman tell me that I should change my name because she would never buy anything with someone with my last name on the cover.
Of course. I'm sure Facebook's just been a blast for you for the past few years.
Well, I mean, it's been fun. Facebook, so it's not so much my last name. People will take my name and identity and pretend to be me.
Oh, that's not fun.
And then swindle people out of money. Swindle women out of money, saying they're me.
Yeah.
And then those women come looking for me.
Oh, those conversations must be fun. I guess the one big benefit of my name is like when, like, let's say I apply for a job, it's really hard to like Google search me if you're an employer, because you search my name and some other dude comes up. So, I mean, I'm not like posting like horrible things on the internet, but if I were, you couldn't find me anyway. So, it's pretty nice.
So let's go back. Let's go to young Tom Green. How did young Tom Green become a wrestling fan?
It's either my third or fourth birthday. I think it's the third. I've tried to like find the actual episode of WWF Superstars. But I remember it was the day of the birthday party. They're getting things ready, Ninja Turtle, everything, and my future brother-in-law soon, which would become my ex-brother-in-law later times, because the institution of marriage in America is just garbage. Anyway, so he turns on WWF Superstars after cartoons are over, and I specifically remember seeing the British Bulldog. And this was like right when he came back after the tag team run. He had the braids down past his shoulders and giant freaking traps, and he looked like a superhero. He looked like a live action superhero, and just hooked from that day. I'm like, there's no way that could be a real person. Like, turns out it was. But the weird thing is, like, I watched the WWF, but I was way more into WCW. So much more. I loved Sting so much more than Hogan. Thought he was so much cooler. I was a weird kid in that, like, most people you meet that fall in love with wrestling in that time period are like, oh, it's the big personalities and the bright colors. And my favorite wrestlers were like Arn Anderson and the guys that wore the trunks and the boots and didn't really do anything fancy. And I was a weird kid like that. But it's funny. I was thinking about it today when I was thinking about this. The closest I ever got to being in a physical fight was in kindergarten, because I wore something with Sting on it. And there was a kid in my class who was a Hogan fan. And he came up to me and is like, that guy's fake, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? That Sting guy, he's a fake Hulk Hogan. I'm like, well, Hulk Hogan sucks, buddy. And he goes off on me about how I'm not a real American. I think at one point he called me a Canadian. And it got bad. Like, I remember specifically the teacher, Mrs. Cook, had to get between us because we were going to throw down over Hogan versus Sting. So I was passionate about my WCW. But like, I remember when I was a kid, like I would have to play wrestle like by myself in my room because my siblings were all very, very much older than me. I think my youngest sister's like got 13 years on me. Wow. So I was essentially an only child with way older siblings. But I would pretend that like the enhancement wrestlers from WCW were my friends. Like Jumpin' Joey Maggs and Mark Starr and guys that like you have to be kind of dorky to remember. Like those were my backup against like Bunkhouse Buck and Arn Anderson and Colonel Parker Stud Stable. And I'm pretty sure I was the only kid in America at that time who was doing that. And then I would do like I was like a 7-8-year-old fantasy booker too. Like I didn't really want to be a wrestler so much. I wanted to make the cards. I didn't even know it was quote unquote predetermined at the time. I just knew somebody had to put these matches together, and gosh darn it, it'd be cool if it was me. I can't find them. I think my mom still got them, like notebooks of like wrestling cards I made for like weeks and weeks of like WCW Saturday Night, and then later on Monday Nitro and the pay-per-views. And I'm not even sure if I wrote storylines. I just wrote down matches I really wanted to see. I'm pretty sure I thought I invented the British round system when I was like 8, because I used to always have Lord Steven Regal in British rules matches. Yeah, so I was an interesting little weird kid who stayed home a lot, watched wrestling, and ate Cheetos in my sweatpants. And yeah, just I was hooked from day one though. Like we had a video store down the road from our house that got all the wrestling tapes in. Every other Wednesday got the new wrestling tapes in, and I would have to like rush over down the street so that this little old Irishman named Mr. Bushman wouldn't get them before me. And we had an agreement that whichever one of us got the new Coliseum video first had to watch it that morning, turn it back in, and let the other one rent it that afternoon.
You and Mr. Bushman made that deal.
Yes, we had to, because it was getting bad, like on both ends. Not just me, the little whiny kid, but also this like 70-something-year-old Irishman who owned the ice cream shop down the road. We had a gentleman's agreement that we would both get to watch the Coliseum videos the same day, and it worked out pretty well until we moved from that town a few years after. But
I was going to say, did you ever consider watching it with him? Or too creepy?
That probably would have been a good idea. But I was also I was a very anxious child, and didn't like being around people a lot, which grew into childhood and all sorts of neuroses that my therapist has torn apart in recent years. But yeah, I probably couldn't have. Actually, if I knew you back then, we could have suggested it. It would have saved us all a lot of problems.
But you know who would have been pissed off? The video store, because they wouldn't get the double rentals that day.
Exactly. Pat Allen Video would have gone out of business much sooner than it did.
I was going to say, is it still in business?
No. I think she went out of. I'm not kidding. I would think she went out of business the year after we moved out of town.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and it has everything to do with those videos and nothing to do with the fact that she was like 80 years old. So
she was living off those Coliseum video rentals.
Oh, I'm sure she was, because we were the only people ever in there. Because I grew up in a town called Rochdale, which is like one of those towns that's like just the one road. You know, it's like a couple convenience stores, a video store, and that's it. And for some reason, we had our own video store, and the only people I ever saw in there were our family. But boy, did I pressure my mom into giving that woman so much money for that. And Gallagher, I was a big Gallagher kid as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was just a little weirdo.
Did they also rent video games?
Yes. Though my mom would buy video games because she was weirdly into them as a middle-aged. I was going to say housewife, but she worked full time too. But like, she would sit there and like defeat Mario World with me, and she would sit there and play Wario's Woods, and she would like buy games. So we didn't really rent games so much as my mom would just buy them from Walmart when we would go into town once a month, and then demolish them. Yeah, it's very, very strange.
So your fantasy wrestling booking actually snowballed into real wrestling booking.
Yes.
And you had your own promotion, and that's one of the ways. I mean, we follow each other on Twitter already, but one of the reasons I reached out was because I was reading the book Too Sweet about indie wrestling, and your name pops up, and I'm like, what are the odds it's the same Tom Green? And I reached out, and it was, and you had no idea you were even in there.
No, not at all.
So let's go back to the beginning of how that whole idea came about.
There's various manifestations of it. The first time I really dipped my toes into it is a lovely two-show group called Fight Sports Midwest. It was myself and some friends, including a dude named Mikey Blanton, who currently runs the Black Label Pro promotion out of Crown Point, Indiana, one of the more successful indies currently running. But Mikey calls me up. I was, I think, first semester of college, and he's like, hey, so I got Scott Norton's phone number off of MySpace. I think I'm going to pretend to book him for a show. You want a three-way call this with me? I'm like, sure. He's like, yeah, I'll put you on mute, whatever. And so he books him for a fake show that was never going to happen. He just wanted to see if he could book a wrestler. And it was super easy. And he pulled the wool over Scott Norton's eyes, for lack of a better term. And Scott Norton's like, hey, you want Raven's phone number? Sure, we'll talk to Raven. Sure. So then Mikey talked to Raven, and he talked to Disco Inferno, and the next thing you know, he had a full card booked for the show that was never going to happen. And Mikey took the responsibility of personally going through and canceling every single person off of this show. Like, he'd even made a MySpace event for it, just to convince them this was going to be real. But he canceled them. But what we came to after that was, wait, we could book wrestlers. It's not that hard. Just call them, and they will say yes. So we pulled together some money, and we booked a show, I think it was St. Patrick's Day 2007 in Portage, Indiana, at the Portage Sportsplex, which is on independentwrestling.tv, streaming there. I don't have a promo code. Screw you, Jerry. You didn't give me one. So just go up and sign for the $9.99 a month anyway. But it's insane what we did, considering we had no idea what we were doing. Like, our main event for our first show was Samoa Joe versus Eddie Kingston.
Jesus.
And King had just broken his ankle too at CZW, and he's like, no, I swear I want the Samoa Joe match. I'm gonna come back early and I'm gonna wrestle, because Joe at the time, I think, he had been X Division champion. He'd had the Ring of Honor title run. I think he was about to beat Kurt Angle for the TNA World title. Like, it was like peak TNA Joe. Like, wow. He was a draw. And we had Larry Sweeney, whose shirt I'm sporting, thanks to the wonderful folks at Pollyanna DIY. We booked him, but we didn't have an opponent. And the story I specifically remember, I had pulled my first and maybe only all-nighter for college, and I was up at 8 a.m., hadn't slept all night, and I was on the Figure 4 Weekly Wrestling Observer website, and Mikey's on the phone going through all these opponents. We could get Chad Collier, we could get this guy, that guy, and I'm not thinking, I'm off in Never Everland, and I go, Brian Alvarez. And Mikey goes, yeah, he used to wrestle. Let's get a hold of him. So Brian Alvarez, who had not wrestled in many years, was specifically a podcaster, newsletter writer, contacted him. He had Larry Sweeney on his podcast. He loved him. And he flew from Washington to Portage, Indiana, did an angle on his podcast, and wrestled Larry Sweeney in front of in Portage, Indiana. The first show did pretty well for indie standards back then. I think we drew 250 people. A good chunk of that is thanks to Brian Alvarez, though. So any wrestlers who want to gripe about dirt sheet writers haven't never drawn or known anything, Brian's the example that you're wrong. And it was a pretty decent match. Trying to think, the artist known as Cesaro was on that show, or now known as Cesaro, rather. He was there. AEW referee Bryce Remsburg was our lead ref. It was Chuck Taylor was supposed to be on the show, but he had seen the lineup, seen how many people we had booked. And Mikey and I have different stories on this. Mikey swears that Chuck Chuck came up with an actual story, when I specifically remember when all the wrestlers showed up that day, hearing that Chuck had told them that he had seen the lineup and figured he wasn't going to get paid because we had booked too many people. So he just didn't.
Okay.
So it was a money loser to the best of my knowledge. Oh, we had Austin Aries, former TNA champion.
This was all on the same card.
On the same card. I'm not even on show number 2. Show number 2, we wasted way more money.
Okay, so let's go. Well, first, before we move to show number 2, let's go to show number 1. So you said you got about 250 people. You had this insane card now. Is that more pressure going into card 2? Because if you start this and you do card 1 and you get like, I don't know, 20, 30 people, you're like, okay, well, we pulled it off and now there's really nowhere to go but up. But when you start with that card and 250 people, now you're like, oh my God, we're an actual promotion.
We didn't know enough to know that we should have pressure on us.
Okay.
We figured we were set. We knew everything. We drew a crowd. We are so much smarter than all these promoters out here. We did it the first time. We're awesome. And we had already been booking like show 2, 3, 4 because we were with the big indie names. You got to book them out in advance, even especially now. But back then, you had to book them well in advance. We had to have dates lined up, and But yeah, we were very young. I was 18. I think Mikey was early 20s. We didn't know enough to know that we should be freaking out. We just figured we did it. All these promoters out here, are drawing 80 people in this area, bringing it other big names, and we did better than them. So, and then show number 2 did about half that crowd with over twice the budget. and it's simple math. We lost a lot of money. Let's see. The main event was Lightning Mike Quackenbush versus Tiger Mask 4 from New Japan in Portage, Indiana. Right? And we Tiger Mask was over on a tour of America because something had happened with the NWA license over there, and they asked him, hey, we need you to drop the belt because Inoki had moved on to the Inoki Genome Federation. New Japan wouldn't be in the NWA group anymore. Problem is, nobody had tipped off the other indie groups that he was working that he was supposed to drop the belt, and they all put him against TNA wrestlers who weren't allowed to have the championship. We were the only one that booked him against a non-TNA guy. So we got to do the title switch in a bowling alley / indoor soccer arena in front of 125 people on a Friday night in Portage, Indiana. And he agreed to be unmasked during the match, too. Yeah, just insanity.
So let me ask this. So you're in the middle of Portage, Indiana. Is that a harder sell because of where it is, or an easier sell because it's not a place that gets a lot of wrestling, so people would assume a wrestling show would do well?
I wouldn't know because we didn't draw locals at all.
Okay.
It was all internet. Because,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was. I think if Fight Sports Midwest was around in 2019, 2020, pre-pandemic, it would have been a lot easier of a sell because way more people were on social media. We had MySpace. Mm-hmm. We had MySpace and a very, very early version of YouTube, which we did use. I mean, if you go look up Larry Sweeney or Brian Alvarez on YouTube, you can see all the promos they did leading up to their match. But I mean, we did Alex Shelley versus Loki. Well, they were both on Top of the X Division on TNA, Spike TV. Awesome Kong was on the card. The wrestler now known as Seth Rollins wrestled Marty Jannetty on this show.
Nice.
Because, Marty, who I've told this story before. I'll kind of condense it here. We were going to put him up in a real nice hotel, and it was across the street from a really awful hotel that I had stayed the night at, brown water, roaches bad. But he had noticed that there was a lady of the evening, so to speak, over there. And he got very interested. And without going into too many specifics, before the credit card could be put down for his hotel room, he's like, I'm going to go over there instead. And he showed up. He disappeared that whole afternoon. And he shows up right before bell time with this woman who apparently he just gave a bunch of money to for the entire day. And she, on top of her normal services, was also his Polaroid lady at intermission as well. So, go ahead.
There's so many questions. I have so many questions. Okay, so he paid this woman to stay with him the rest of the day
Yeah.
And then she was taking the Polaroids of him with the fans.
Yes.
Was he the biggest draw there?
I don't think so. I think we could have drawn the exact same crowd without like him or like 8 other people. We just stacked names on top of names on top of names. Like Joey Mercury was there, and we were his first booking after he got fired from WWE after the whole like ladder thing where his face exploded, and then he showed up to catering and various conditions I won't speculate on here. We were his first indie booking after that, like straight off of WWE TV. We had him. Again, we had guys from TNA. It was on Spike TV every, I think, Saturday night at that point. We had the cream of the crop of the indies.
So how did you get in contact with all these guys? Just because of who you had, and then this wrestler tells this wrestler?
Exactly. So it was a little bit of we didn't screw anybody over on pay for the first show. So wrestlers were more like, hey, you should contact you should contact Mikey, or I was kind of Mikey was the promoter of Name, but Mikey at the time didn't have a computer, so I would be quote unquote Mikey in the emails and the MySpace messages going out, and also I was helping with the booking. So it was a lot of recommendations based upon the fact that we didn't screw anybody over for money on the first show, and also, we could be like, hey, so and so we booked. Could you get us so and so's email? I know you guys are friends. Yeah, sure, easy. So I want to paraphrase something that a friend of mine, Joe Sposto, who I'm sure is listening because he's a dear friend, and I'll send this to him the second it goes up online. He used to do commentary for Chikara under the name Leonard F. Chikarison. And he used to hang around like ECW shows when he was like younger. And something he has said before that it's always kind of stuck with me. I'll paraphrase it, if I would have known how easy it was to get into wrestling, I would have done it before I did it. Like, as if you're willing to go set up like chairs, you're in. Ta-da! Like, that's the big secret. It's not, and because it's like such like a smoke screen. Like when you're on the outside, it's like this mysterious pathway. How do you get in? And then once you're in, it's like, that's it. That's all I had to do. Okay, free labor. Like literally, that's it. And in our case, it was literally send emails, and wrestlers will be like, yeah, sure, I'll come work for you for various small dollar amounts that are preposterous to the labor that they put in the ring. It was way easier, and you can tell that by the fact that our second show was like 13 matches, I want to say. It was like a 5.5 hour show with 2 intermissions. It's so many wrestlers on it. We had, I think it was 70s. I haven't counted a few. I swear it was like 70 something. We had like a 4-way tag match and a multi-person mismatch we were there all freaking night for the second show, and then we had like other shows planned, and then Mikey's mom had health issues, and we ran out of money as well. As you can tell by the fact that we drew 125 people with that lineup, and nothing really happened for me in wrestling for a few years. Decided to be like a normal person, and finish college and all that. And then there was here in the town that I'm from, Lafayette, there's a local wrestler named Billy Rock who he became pretty well known in like the national indie scene about 5, 6, 7 years ago. He was in the same like quote unquote indie wrestling classes like the Ricochets and the Chuck Taylors coming up from this area, who were going over to the East Coast and making their name in various indies. He'd gotten the booking job for a local group, and he knew that I had a degree in television production. He's like, hey, I got this idea for an opening video montage. Can you do it? I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. I had been Billy's like tape trader guru, like, because our area of Indiana's indie wrestling scene up until Billy got a hold of it was like a vortex into the 70s and the 80s. Even when all the other indie wrestling was like getting into the flippy doos and the lucha and the Japanese style. It was very much punch and kick, and everyone wearing boas and the super duper old school stuff.
Mm.
And Billy was not that way, and he would beg me, like, get me tapes from England and Mexico and this and that. And I was like an internet stooge, so I could get him tapes from anywhere. And he relied on me for that. That's how we bonded. But ended up doing that video montage for him, and then I ended up doing more video work for his training school, the School of Rock, which led to us doing a YouTube series called Class Wars, which for the indie wrestling scene got some buzz, mostly because I don't want to sound like one of those pretentious wrestling people who swears that everything I did was the first time it's ever been done and it was so amazing. Pretty sure we were the first group to ever do like an episodic 13-week season wrestling show. And it was out of necessity because one of the wrestlers had gotten a camera and he wanted to do, if you're familiar with Beyond Wrestling, they used to do matches in like an empty building in front of just wrestlers. And he wanted to do that style. And I heard about it and like, you guys can't copy them because then you're just the group that's copying the group that's getting popular. And then I went home and I wrote out like a fake reality show out of the shed that they ran the training school out of. And we filmed 13 weeks of it on the most shoestring budget imaginable. We had a DSLR and a ladder, and the ladder to like tripod it on, and a wrestling ring in a shed. And we got 13 weeks of this YouTube show out of it. And I had gained Billy's trust and everyone there's trust, just because we came up with this weird thing that was getting his students bookings across the country. Chikara and CZW and Billy Corgan's first group, Resistance Pro, before he got into Impact in the NWA. I got a couple of dudes booked on that as well. They got themselves booked. I just supplied the video and so on and so forth. And then we did more stuff with his newer class, and we actually ended up running a live show here 2012, I want to say. It was like 8 or 9 years ago. And we drew like almost, I think it was like 450, 500 people. Wow. In a town where normally indie wrestling does like 80 a show. And the only quote-unquote name we had on it was Nick Dinsmore, Eugene. And we couldn't advertise him on the TV commercials because he had another booking conflicting with it. It wouldn't tell us until the week of that he was for sure going to come to our show. So we might as well have not booked him. We didn't get any advertising value out of them. So we essentially drew 450 with students from a wrestling school. And I don't say that to like negate them or cut them down or anything, but it's to the general public at that time. They were students from a wrestling school. I mean, some of them went on to some fame, the most notoriety being she was then known as Heidi Lovelace, now known as Ruby Riott in WWE. She came from the School of Rock, sweetheart of a person. I love her to death. Still pals to this day. But no, we drew a big crowd, and we were well on our way. And then we got wrapped up in this deal that Chikara was doing, where they were going to like co-promote like 7 different groups across the country, and we were going to be one of them. And it was like, oh, cool, we'll all combine resources, except that I'm not sure how familiar you are with Mike Quackenbush, the megalomaniac of Chikara, for lack of a better term. He wanted full control over everything that would have been my position. And so, like in terms of like booking and branding and marketing and so on and so forth. And essentially after butting heads a couple of times, I just kind of was like, you can do this. I was too immature for it. Because I was, as well, if you ever talk to anybody who's worked with Mike, it's very hard to work with him creatively because it's his way or the highway, for better or worse. And if anybody wants to Google Mike Quackenbush Chikara, you can read all sorts of other ugly stories about the guy that I won't repeat on your podcast because it could be litigious.
Mm.
Anyway,
They're out there.
yeah, they're out there. You can read them. But anyway, so I spent a couple years after that doing like commentary on some indie shows. The most notable being a group called Freelance Underground that's on IWTV. I think they just ran The Collective this past year. I did about a year with them, and then my wife Alex and I adopted our boys Eric and Noli, and we got to learn more about like the foster care system and how it works and how kids get shuffled around and how it's not so pretty for them. And kind of we're sitting around like, you know, like one day, like what can we do to benefit these kids? And, you know, I'm looking at my pretend Rolodex of indie wrestlers in my phone and on Twitter and various things, and let's run a benefit show. So for the first time without Mikey Blanton or Billy Rock or just me, pretty much with Alex helping out with some of the non-wrestling stuff, we ran a benefit show June 2017 called the Dynamite Cup. It was like a tournament show with like the top young wrestlers from the Midwest. We did two of those, 2017, 2018. 2017, we actually drew well in terms of money, but we did a deal called a sponsor receipt system where people online would pay for tickets and we would get them out to kids or families in the area who couldn't necessarily afford to go to a wrestling show. And we just got over our heads. We sold so many of those seats, but we could not get the tickets out. So like we sold every ticket, but if you watch the video, there's like practically nobody there. Like we were able to donate like over, I think, $3,500 for that show alone to Together We Rise. But if you watch the video, there's like nobody in the crowd because we just couldn't get the tickets to enough people. In 2018, we actually got butts in the seats and got the tickets out to families, and it was a way better atmosphere. I think between the two shows, we raised over $6,000 for Together We Rise, which is a group that benefits children in the foster care system, gives them more than just a trash bag to put their stuff in between homes, reunites them with siblings to go on trips to like Disney World and Six Flags and so on. Really great group. It's if listeners want to look more into it, it's togetherwerise.org. I'm really proud of the talent list we had for the Dynamite Cup shows that have gone on to do other things in wrestling. Be it, you know, Warhorse, who was on AEW Dynamite this past summer. Danhausen, who has freaking merchandise and Hot Topic now, which is insane.
I just interviewed him last night.
Oh my goodness, he's a sweetie pie. I love him to death.
Yeah. So, and well, I actually, by the time this interview drops, his will have already gone out.
Yeah.
But what I got to do with him was, so it's an hour episode. For the first half hour, I talked to Danhausen, and for the second half hour, I talked to Donovan Danhausen.
Gotcha.
Which was good because as much fun as it was for the first half hour, I was like, I don't know how long we could do this. Like, I know how long I could do it, but I don't know how longer people are going to want to listen to this.
Right. So
but he was a super nice guy.
Yeah, he's a sweetie pie. God, there's a story I'll tell you off the air. I don't want to be one of those people that's going to do it on podcast but I don't want to break the whole Danhausen aura.
Yeah.
I'll tell you off the air. But he's a sweetie pie. You know, we've had Calvin Tankman, who just debuted on MLW. Cole Radrick, who's doing things out for GCW. All sorts of like wrestlers who have gone on to do big things. But the thing that I guess that got the most press is there were battle royals on both shows. And my son Noli, who at the time was a 3-year-old, I decided I don't want to book this battle royal. I'm going to let him do it. And so I let my 3-year-old book the battle royals on the shows and called them the Noli Rumble. I legitimately let him do it. He would give me ideas. I would put them down on paper, and then I would pull all the wrestlers aside, and he would lead the meetings. I wish we had pictures or video of it, because it is as absurd as it sounds. This tiny little boy who doesn't, and it's not like I clued him in on what wrestling is, like in terms of it being predetermined. He very much to this day thinks it's 100% a shoot, whatever terms you want to use. But he was like, I want Giants, Dad, and I want I want a girl, and I want an animal, and I want this, and I want that. And we made it happen for both of them. The second Noli Rumble, he wanted my older son, his older brother Eric, to win, which is hard because I'm not about to put, then it was a 6-year-old in a wrestling match with like 15 grown adults.
Right.
So we put him in a ghost costume at ringside. And at the right time, when the two bad guys, the carnies, were done throwing everybody out, we put the microphone in front of him, and he yelled, "Boo!" And they went flying over the top rope, and then Eric unmasks, and everyone was, "Yay!" But like, I mean, Noli was he was the host of we did the old Mean Gene style update segments on YouTube. He was the host of those. He did the commentary for the matches. So if anyone wants to watch them on YouTube, search Noli Rumble. They're both there. They are as absurd as they sound. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. Raised thousands of dollars for a great charity, and then I tapped out because just the anxiety of running shows, it got to me, and I chose my mental health over running one show every year. As great as it was, and as much fun as it is to say that, you know, my child booked a match, and that my 6-year-old is the world's youngest battle royal winner. I chose me, and chose to give myself a reprieve over the glory of being an indie wrestling promoter, for lack of a better term, and that's kind of where the story ends, I guess.
Do you think your kids will get into it?
Get into? You mean like getting into promoting, or getting into
wrestling, any part of the world?
Eric, no. My older son Eric hates wrestling.
The battle royal winner. The battle royal winner hates wrestling.
But he has no interest in it. He loves Power Rangers, Pokemon, Bakugan, Beyblades. But like, he tried wrestling. He gave it a chance. And it just, of all things, it wasn't ridiculous enough for him. Like, if it had like explosions and people flying, you know, like legitimately flying and all that stuff, it'd be one thing. But like, I've taken him to some shows, and he's just not. He's watching on TV. He kind of likes Rey Mysterio, but other than that, can't. Noli, on the other hand, I'm surprised he isn't taking bookings now. Like, some friends of mine, Marty DeRosa and Sarah Shockey, they do the Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling podcast on the MLW network. They've joked that he's the internet, like, wrestling Twitter's favorite child. He did a spot in a match when he was 3. He you know, every time I post something about him on Twitter, like, things explode. He's cut promos on like Cody Rhodes and had Cody respond to him, and like he's obsessed. Like, he's the kid who in kindergarten, when they had to make the posters like introducing themselves to their classmates, like, here, there's what I like McDonald's and French fries and Pokemon and whatever. He made us put together a poster that was based on the picture of the time he met Orange Cassidy. So you walk down the hallway of his school, and it's like, you know, so-and-so with their family, or, you know, this kid, you know, at Disney World, and then you see a tiny little boy kneeling down with Orange Cassidy giving the thumbs up. He dressed up as him because, of course.
Yeah. Kids love Orange Cassidy.
Oh my goodness, you wouldn't think so. Yeah. But he's got something that kids love.
Yeah.
Like, and bless his heart, because like, before Noli found out about Orange Cassidy, he did a match on YouTube with the now Malcolm Bivens, who's managing NXT. He did like a cinematic match with them, and we watched that on YouTube, and Noli became like obsessed from that moment on. But before that, when we would play wrestle, he would beat the living tar out of me. He wouldn't pull anything. He would hit me in very unsafe places, land on me with full weight, and then he found Orange Cassidy, and it became so much less painful. Because
he just sticks his hands in his pockets.
Yeah, sticks his hands in his pockets, does the little light kicks. It's like, oh, this is so much easier. Nice. But like it's funny. Like, I mentioned Black Label Pro before. Like, I'll take him to those shows in Crown Point, and it's gotten to the point with Noli where, Like, they have all the wrestlers with fans lined up to buy their merchandise. There are times I take him to shows and it's the other way around. Wrestlers lined up to see him.
That's
because
amazing.
he's so popular with all of them. Like Warhorse and Danhausen both know him by name. There's pictures of like him dressed up like Warhorse at shows. Warhorse calls him War Pony. He did his own makeup once, like the Warhorse makeup. We went to a show.
Nice.
But yeah, like we've I mentioned Marty and Sir earlier. Them and some other people have joked that when let's say he becomes like WWE champion someday, he's going to have the best WrestleMania video package ever because he's got all this video and pictures of him with like everybody that's in AEW and NXT right now because he sees them at these indie shows and meets them, and but no, he's obsessed. He again, it's funny because like even typical kids who are into wrestling are like, oh yeah, I like John Cena, I like Roman Reigns. He's like, and Noli's like, well, I really like Top Flight. They were on AEW, or I like Calvin Tankman. He will watch any wrestling I put in front of him, and he will love it.
Is he gonna get in a fight like his dad over Sting and Hogan?
No. So what he's doing, like in preschool, we got a note from home, or we got a video from his teacher. They were out in the playground, and he had all the kids lined up on the monkey bars or whatever, and he was going to teach them how to do moonsaults.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and they had to get involved, and we had to explain to them, oh, yeah, that's a wrestling move that he likes, the moonsault. It's a backflip. Oh, yeah, we've joked that he's either going to become the most successful pro wrestler ever or a cult leader. It's one or the other. He's got this weird charisma about him. He's already,
they're both kind of the same.
Yeah. Like he's already doing like in kindergarten last year before the world shut down. Kind of shut down. America questionable. We entered him in like a 1 week like wrestling camp for of the high school was doing, and he did so well that he got invited to like the second and third graders like all year camp that year. Wow. And we took him to a bunch of wrestling meets, and he for a kindergartner that was way in over his head, he did pretty darn well. And the coach at the high school is like, yeah, we need him back every year because I want to groom him for high school and blah 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 blah. So wow. Nice. So he's like a super freak athlete, and he's running around cutting promos. So, and he's already got a bunch of ins. Like all these wrestlers know who he is. So, nice. Yeah, it's pretty well determined he's going to be like the biggest star in the world. I'm not biased or anything, but
not at all. Well, but before we wrap up, let's talk about your third favorite child, which is WCW Deep Cuts on Twitter.
Oh yes,
which is my new favorite Twitter account. The other day, I was laughing so hard about the clip where they lost the NWO voiceover. So I believe Eric Bischoff had to do it, and he just
So
it wasn't Bischoff.
Yeah, So and I got it kind of confused in the description. So in the voiceover part of the song, it's Bischoff, and it was a production guy, Neil Pruitt. He used to direct Nitro.
Okay.
Who would do the no New World Order? We are in control. Yeah. But like you said, they left that track at home, and they just sent them with the generic porno song that they would go out to. And you would think just play that song and be all right, but for whatever reason, they didn't, and they had some guy in the locker room on the mic, no New World Order. And it's so good. So good.
What's been your favorite one so far?
That one did pretty well. I love everything with Ming and the Barbarian because they had no regard for any of their opponents at all. There was one I posted today of there was a QVC special. I think you might have retweeted it. I saw
that. I did.
Yeah. Oh, it was so awkward where the hosts of the QVC show had no idea what was going on in WCW, didn't know who any of the wrestlers were, but they had to host a 2-hour show backstage at a house show. And one of the hosts was like, oh, yeah, I want to interview Kevin Nash, and it's going to be so great. Kevin Nash is coming, and it's Scott Hall walking down. and he's like, "Hey, Kevin," and he's like, and Hall just starts pointing at his crotch where his name is written.
Yeah.
It says Hall. It says Hall, and then you can tell it's supposed to be like a pretty like decent segment, like pretty decent length segment, and he won't answer the question, and instead he's just like, "I want to give a shout out to Brian Hildebrand, who's battling cancer," and just walks away. Like,
you know what amazed me about that? Like, I stopped and thought to myself, wow, WCW was so big they were on QVC.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, there was a battle between the two home shopping networks because the WWF was on the home shopping network.
Okay.
So WCW got to deal with QVC to battle them. That's how like neck and neck it was. Like they had to each get their own shopping network.
I can't believe either of them were on that kind of, because we see QVC today. I can't imagine there being like AEW wrestling stuff on QVC.
Absolutely not. That's how big it was. Like now, I think it's way more niche. We live in a world where pop culture is very much based on what the most passionate niche is, whose fan base wants to spend the most money. Whereas back then, like 8 million people would watch Monday Night Raw, and then you would go to school the next day, and everybody would have known what happened with Stone Cold or with Hollywood Hogan or Goldberg or what have you.
Right.
It was insane, and like even like the thing I think the reason why I think the Twitter account's grown so much is because even these B and C shows, you go back and you like look at the ratings they did. There were more people watching WCW Pro at 9 a.m. on a Sunday than were watching NXT. Then I think they were doing equal ratings to AEW right now.
Yeah.
We're getting up at 9 a.m. on a Sunday to watch High Voltage against Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker and Hard Work Bobby Walker.
So how much content do you have to watch to get that short little clip?
So much. So the whole reason behind the Twitter account, a couple months ago, my weight had gotten way out of control, and I'm like, I got to start working out. I got to start doing something. And as anybody who's ever been, done cardio for more than a few minutes can tell you, eventually you gotta have something in front of you to kind of keep your mind going. But the thing is, for me at least, I don't know how it is for anybody else, I can't have something that's so enthralling that I don't pay attention to the workout, and then I start going half speed. But I can't have something so boring that I start thinking, oh man, this is really hard, and then I end up quitting. I got to have something right in the middle. And so I tried music, I tried Netflix shows, and then one of my YouTube recommendations was a full episode of WCW Worldwide. I'm like, I'm going to try this. And it was perfect because it's just matches. It's no storylines I have to get into, and I'm familiar with all the players from back then. And it's just weird enough and interesting enough that I can have it on and it can have some of my attention, but not so. It doesn't engross me so much that I start going half speed on the elliptical. And so I'm doing this a half hour a day, 5 days a week, and I'm watching so much, and I'm noticing every once in a while, here's a weird thing, or here's a cool move that people don't do these days, or here's Dusty Rhodes going off on a tangent about somebody who called him TBS saying that he shouldn't say the mothership. That was another one of my favorite clips where Dusty just goes off during a match about a viewer who sent in a nasty phone call. I'm like, I should do something with this. So I kind of combined my need to lose weight with my desire to get internet clout, and started gifting and putting stuff out from my workouts. I would take mental notes, and then I would go out to the car. I would sit down afterwards and skip back and gift things on my phone, and I put it out as like hey, if you want to follow, cool. If not, I'm doing this just to keep myself motivated. And then slowly but surely, organically, people are like, this is it's been very organic. I thought maybe I'd get 100 followers, and I'd be motivated to entertain them. And we're at almost 8,000 as we record this, so it's pretty neat.
Did you ever have something so funny that it almost made you fall off the elliptical or something?
Yes. There was one. I'm trying to think of what it was. Oh, it was Dusty Rhodes was calling a match with this Olympian named Chip Mitten, who was a bobsledder. And it was him, it was Dusty, Chris Cruz, and Larry Zbyszko. And they started talking about different Olympic events, bobsled, luge, etc. And then Chip Mitten does a leg drop and misses. And Dusty Rhodes goes, he landed on his lube. And Zbyszko's like, what did you say? He's like, his lube. He landed on his lube. And Zbyszko's like, what? And I just about lost my mind, because I mean it's again, the show is airing at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And Dusty Rhodes is going off about this dude's butt and lube, and it keeps the bit going for a good minute. Eventually it was Zbyszko's like, oh, for Pete's sake, and he goes, no, for lube's sake. He knows what he's doing.
Dusty knew exactly what he was doing and what was gonna. I was actually watching an old episode. It was a Nitro episode leading into Starrcade with they were doing the whole Hogan Sting angle, and it was the episode where the lights throughout the show would go out and NWO members would be taken out, and then the lights would come back on. It was Sting coming in and out. So there's one part where the lights go out, and the show was coming from Buffalo, and the lights go out, and Mike Tenay goes, well, this is just Erie. And Bobby Heenan goes, no, it's not. It's Buffalo.
Oh, Heenan was like, boom, boom. On these worldwide episodes where he doesn't think anybody's watching. And again, it's funny because it's syndicated during the peak. So more people are watching that than modern wrestling now. But he's just going off on these tangents just to entertain himself. And Gene Okerlund, I found some house show promos for, they did a house show in, not at Madison Square Garden, but in the Paramount Theater that's attached to it. And it was a big deal. WCW is invading WWF territory. And there's a promo with him and Lex Luger where he opens it by saying, I got some phone calls today. Some old friends of mine wanted some free tickets, like Howard Finkel and Bruce Pritchard. I'm like, what? Why are you saying their names on WCW television? Gene didn't care. He was awesome. But yeah, some of those house show promos from that era where it's Luger and Arn Anderson not thinking anybody's watching, so they're just going off in weird places. There's a promo where I found where Sting and Luger, when they were tag champs, Sting had to negotiate Luger down to 5 minutes of peck dancing, and Luger's like, no, I want to make him bounce, and I don't know. WWE is the gift that keeps on giving, because it's a combo of people not knowing what they were doing and people who knew what they were doing but just didn't care enough to do the right thing or do the thing that made sense and would just goof off. It's wonderful.
It wasn't until I was older and looked back and watched the episodes and saw just how many screw-ups they made. Really ridiculous screw-ups that a company that size should not do.
Oh no, there's especially they were really bad at airing segments weeks out of order and giving away pay-per-view finishes and oh my goodness.
There was one. It was a WCW Saturday night where I feel like it was Cactus Jack and Johnny B. Bad were tag team partners, but so they're tag team partners on the show, but that wasn't supposed to happen yet because that actually happens at is it Battle Bowl where they pick the teams?
Yeah, the random teams. Yeah.
Right. So, but that aired the night before Battle Bowl actually happened. So, and then they were saying how those two got paired up at Battle Bowl, but it hadn't even happened yet.
Yeah,
and they completely blew it. And I guess they're just well, I hope no one notices.
No. And I've asked people because I'm lucky enough to have friends who have been around the tape library that WWE has now. I'm like, why do you think that happened? And apparently, when they got the WCW tape library, nothing was labeled.
Oh, jeez.
15 years of tapes. And this goes back to when they were doing that. So these poor editors were having to go through unlabeled tapes and just kind of put stuff in order. So they're it totally makes sense why it happened, because they had no idea what they were putting on the show from week to week. and they were like taping over things, and I mean, there's so much where it's like those worldwide tapings at Disney. They tape so much stuff that nobody will ever see. Like that's a network show I want if they have the footage. Is like all the stuff from like the WCW shows that didn't make air that was supposed to happen. Like Sid Vicious, not when he stabbed Arn Anderson, was supposed to win the world title, and then they fired him. They taped TV for like 4 months ahead of time with him with the world title. Or there was one point in like '94, the years before Kurt Hennig came to WCW, where they had Ric Flair go on TV, or they had at a TV taping go on and challenge Mr. Perfect by that name, which they did not own. They, in front of a crowd, they had him go out and challenge him, and they never aired it because Perfect didn't come in. Wow. Or the one I really want to see is there was a TV taping in, I think it was Georgia, where they had Harlem Heat in like '95, like right when ECW really gets going. They had him managed by a Florida indie wrestler named Johnny Attitude doing a Paul Heyman ripoff gimmick.
Oh, really?
Like same haircut, same outfit, to like make fun of Paulie, and but they never aired it. And like that's the stuff I really want to see. Like that library is so like, man, that I don't want to say it'd be the dream job because I would never want to work there in a million years because everybody I know who works there is gone insane.
Yeah.
I would just love like a week where I could go through that tape library. Like that'd be the dream.
Why do you think? I mean, do you have the WWE Network?
Yes.
Why do you think they still, after all? I mean, WWE Network has been around what, 6-7 years now?
It's 8, almost 8. Okay. Because I specifically remember the weekend it came out. It was 2012. Yeah.
Why have they still not put up all the old Challenge and Superstars episodes?
I get into something I've asked about, and I think part of it is I think it's that the new stuff does better numbers, like the Chronicle. Drew McIntyre goes home and milks a cow, does better numbers than the stuff we really want to see. So that's part of it, and I think even if it did better numbers, I think the people with power positions up there don't see the value in their own tape library, which is a shame. Yeah. Because man, there's some stuff they have that I would just and like again, if going back to the WCW deep cuts, imagine if all that stuff was on the network in crystal clear quality instead of the third generation VHS stuff I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
Like there's some stuff I'm like, I can't post this. This is so that you can barely tell that that's Conan doing the clothesline. But like imagine if all that stuff was on there. Yeah. And I used to think it was just that they were holding off trying to give people something to subscribe to every, something to come back for every month. But like this month, there's no classic stuff going up. Like they normally they throw you like 10 episodes of primetime wrestling to keep you happy. They're not even doing that this month. It's like these conversations. We're not doing a podcast right now. We're doing a conversation. Yeah. Those and apparently, supposedly, they do much better numbers, which I'm sure. As much as hard as it is to believe, since we're on Twitter all day and we're plugged in, we're the minority, and the majority are people I've never met before. They're the people that you used to go to like live events, and they would sit around you, and they would be the ones that were going nuts for like Braun Strowman. And then not to insult Braun, whatever, but like you know what I mean, though. Like the ones that I would never see this person in real life, but there's like 1,000 of them here at this wrestling show. They're the ones that are watching Uncool with Alexa Bliss or Drew and A. It's a real show, Drew and A. That's a real name of a show.
You know what they should do? So the network is $10.99. They should just do tier. They should do tier systems.
They should.
$10.99 is regular. You want all the archives? $19.99, and there's a special unlock, and it'll show you every challenge, every superstars, whatever.
And the thing is, it's all digitized. Like I know for a fact, they hired somebody like a decade ago to digitize all that footage, so they could just upload it. It's just a click of a button. It's uploaded. It's out. Like it's not like ECW where it's music rights issues. Which Yeah, ECW on the network, completely unwatchable, by the way. Just
it is
not.
it is.
But
especially when New Jack comes out.
In the ghetto, in the ghetto. Oh my goodness. That song, I have nightmares about that song sometimes.
Yeah.
But like, no, you could just, drag and click and drop and it's there. Like,
Yeah.
And also the thing is, people like us would spend that money. It's
Yes.
not like those fans, the ones I'm talking about that have the Braun Strowman shirts and the Jeff Hardy armbands and all that. Again, bless them. They're keeping wrestling going.
Right.
They wouldn't pay $20 to watch, a Don Morocco match from 1984.
Yeah, I certainly would.
Absolutely, we would,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't necessarily double the network numbers, but it would make the network look a heck of a lot better to the shareholders at the next meeting. But they, unfortunately, we're not named McMahon. We're not going to be making stuff move, and that's another with WWE cuts. Something I've told people before: anything that's on the network, I don't put on that account because, with the exception of one clip that Simon Gotch requested specifically from me once, I wanted to see if I could find it, and I found it within 3 minutes of Charles Robinson taking a bump on a Nitro, and for some reason he did a standing shooting star press. It's amazing. But other than that, nothing from the network goes on that account, partially because, like Nitro and Thunder, everybody knows all the screw-ups on there. Everybody knows all the cool moves from those shows. We all, 5 million people watch those every week, whereas the stuff I'm uploading is the stuff you don't remember. I uploaded a clip from a house show tonight. That's the stuff I think people kind of get a kick out of. And also, I don't want WWE to pull the account down.
Right.
And from what I've noticed with YouTube, if you post stuff that they own that's not on the network, they don't care. So apparently they're just like, we own this stuff, but you guys deal with the crappy looking footage and we'll sit on it forever. So it is what it is.
Well, let's tell people where they can find you besides the WCW Deep Cuts. Where's your Twitter account? Anything else you want to talk about?
Twitter, Instagram, not that Tom Green. Pretty simple. That's pretty much it. I mentioned it before. The only thing I really otherwise have to plug, I like to plug at least, go to togetherwerise.org if you have the means. I know everybody's hurting, especially this year, for money with everything's gone on with the pandemic, etc. But if you're in a position to donate anything, look at what they do on there for children in foster care. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just love the work they do. And even if I can't promote charity shows, I love pointing people in that direction because I've seen firsthand the work they do for kids and for kids who need it, who really, really need the help. Because again, these kids, they get sent to homes with a trash bag with a couple of things of theirs, and it just screws up their sense of identity. And this group that helps them, it's siblings that get lost in the system. It's really cool. Go there. But again, socials, not that Tom Green. I don't really mess with like the TikToks and the Snapchats because I'm an old person. I'm sure my kids will be on there in a few years, but don't follow them because that's weird and don't do that. But yeah, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you so much, Chris, for finding value in my story and bringing me on your podcast.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna have you on again, and maybe we're gonna do like a watch along next time.
That would be awesome. I am totally down for that. That'd be so much fun.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And that brings another episode of Not About Wrestling to a close. Guests of the Not About Wrestling show stay in their own damn houses. If you like the show, please share it on social or leave a review on iTunes. And remember to subscribe to Not About Wrestling on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/BroBible and find the Not About Wrestling section. Thanks again for listening or watching, and see you all next week. Well, I won't see you at all. You know what I mean.